The feast that we celebrate today, the Solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, King of the universe, was instituted in 1925 by Pope Pius XI. It was in many ways the Church's last loving look at the absolute monarchy over which the Church had held sway for centuries. From the time of Constantine, who legitimized Christianity as an acceptable religion in the Roman Empire, and his successor, Theodosius, who made Christianity the official religion of the empire, Christianity, the Church grew in wealth, power, and control. In a very real sense, the Church became a kingdom, and with that faced again and again the burdens and the temptations that every kingdom confronts. By Constantine's gift, Christianity was both officially established and fatally compromised. Writing in her book, A Distant Mirror, The Calamitous 14th Century, the author Barbara Tuchman quotes the medieval poet William Langland. When the kindness of Constantine gave Holy Church endowments in lands and leases, lordships and servants, the Romans heard an angel cry on high above them, "This day dos ecclesia has drunk venom, and all who have Peter's power are poisoned forever." The centuries would all too often prove Langland's prophecy true, as too often the Church abandoned her vocation as the instrument for the establishment of God's kingdom and focused instead on the earthly kingdom it was amassing. By the beginning of the 20th century, the marriage of altar and throne that had lasted for centuries was quickly dissolving. Atheism and secularism had arrived, and communism and fascism were not far behind. Pius XI, in establishing this feast, sought to emphasize Christ's sovereignty over the whole world, a sovereignty that must no longer be defined by worldly criteria. This final feast of the liturgical year invites us to reflect upon the unique shape and character of Christ's kingship. While some might find the monarchical and even patriarchal language off-putting, we should look more closely at the character of Christ's kingship. Before Jesus' crucifixion, it is Pilate who gets straight to the point, asking, "Are you the king of the Jews?" The unfolding of the events that day make it clear, yes, Jesus is the king that we have. A king who is crowned with thorns, who is robed in a royal mantle for the sake of derision, and who receives a scepter in his hands, which is a reed of contempt. This is a king who came from the backwater town of Nazareth in anonymity and poverty. He rules not as a tyrant, but as a simple shepherd who, as Ezekiel foretold in our first reading, will seek out the lost, bind up the injured, and heal the sick. And as St. Paul told the Corinthians in our second reading, the purpose of Christ's reign is to destroy all that would stand in the way of the redemptive power of love. This brings us to the gospel scene of the Last Judgment, where the Son of Man is seated upon his throne and all the nations are assembled before him. Interestingly, this passage is contained in the rite of Christian burial and is offered as a gospel option for funeral masses. I am sure that it is often chosen to extol the works of charity of the deceased whose life is being celebrated. I myself just recently used it as a baptism, saying that it sounds like a job description for parents, feeding the hungry, giving them something to drink even in the middle of the night, welcoming a little naked stranger into this world, and caring for them when they're sick. What about prison? Well, Dad goes and sits in timeout with them. But we have to look more carefully at the text. It does not say that multitudes of individuals are being separated into sheep and goats. It's the nations that will be judged. The nations are being separated. It's the nations that will be judged on these acts of mercy, these acts of charity, these acts of justice. And the hard question is, how will we as a nation be judged? We live in an imperfect world. It was created perfectly by God, but then Adam and Eve sinned, and their children sinned, and their children after them sinned again and again and again, until just a few seconds ago when that sinning continues through some of Adam and Eve's great grandchildren. The effect of all this sinning throughout history, up to a few seconds ago, is to break down the perfection of the world God created, to tear it apart at the seams, to destroy its wholeness and integrity. Now, Jesus came to reclaim that world and to restore it to its original grace and glory. For that, he suffered, died, and was raised up. But despite his sacrifice, we continue to sin, and the world continues to crumble apart. And the world we live in, with all of its brokenness, is the result of all of our sinning. My sinning, your sinning, everyone's sinning. It destroys the fabric of this world in all its beauty, its oneness, its completeness. As a nation, we have felt the effects of this sinfulness and the crumbling of the world up around us in an up close and personal way in the past few months, and especially in the past few weeks. Now, I'm not an economist, so I can't begin to tell you how this recent election will affect the global economy or your own personal retirement funds. I'm not a historian, so I cannot tell you how those elected compare to those who have served in the past. I'm not a political scientist, so I cannot tell you how the winners' decisions and policies will impact foreign and domestic relations. But I am your pastor, your shepherd, your father, and like you, I struggle to be a person of faith. And so I want to conclude these remarks by reflecting with you on how we as Catholics are called to move forward at this point in our country's history. This past election cycle has made us acutely aware of how deeply divided we are as a country. Not only the vitriolic rhetoric and the open hostility towards individuals and groups, but also the emphasis of 24-hour nonstop commentators highlighting the depth of the chasm among the people of this country and the intensity of the pain of so many. The jolt we feel in recognizing this acute alienation is akin to receiving a diagnosis of a serious, life-threatening illness. Shock, disbelief, anger, numbness, frustration, and an overwhelming awareness of just how clueless we are about all that is around us. How are we to move forward? The work of moving forward cannot be the task of just some of us. No matter who we supported or who we voted for, we are all in need of healing, and we are all called to work for unity. While individual candidates can be winners or losers, we the people, must do all we can to ensure that all of us are winners. Those who won must not use their power for recrimination and self-advancement. Those who lost must not sulk and withdraw from engagement, waiting to win the next time around. Rather, we must come together for the common good of all, of individuals, of the country, and of the world. We live in an imperfect world which continues to unravel around us because of sin, but it continues to heal because of grace. It is God's work in which we are called to share. We come together at this table today and always not as a red congregation or a blue congregation, but a purple congregation or a paisley congregation or a patchwork or tie-dyed congregation. Our parish motto says it in 6 words: diverse in background, united in faith. And we come to this table like any family table with our differences and our longing to be one. We come to this table, all of us sinners and all of us struggling to be better. We come here to be reconciled and to have the strength to be prophetic when the world needs to hear another voice, a voice it may not want to hear. We come to this place to accept the fact that no matter how we voted, we cannot and must not be separated. We must move together into the future and take up the work of building a better future, a better country, a better world. In the end, it may not be perfect, but we can all strive to make it better. In the end, we will not be judged just on what we have done in our own lifetime, but what our nation has done in our lifetime. May we work together so our nation will be judged as righteous and invited by Christ the King to stand with the sheep on the right-hand side.